Hi everyone, here is another video. I'm going to read a brief, or no, this is still pretty long text actually, from my blog, which you can of course also read if you go to my blog, Sound Verbal Behavior. And I will post also underneath here, I will try to do that, the link to my blog. But before I go into reading this writing, by the way, which is based on my speaking. So yeah, I just want you to know that all my writing is always preceded by speaking. And even though that speaking may have happened already, I don't know, weeks ago or something like that, I can write about it because I've spoken like that. And I know what it is like to speak like that. Yeah. So I want to, before I go into this reading, I want to compliment and also just praise my dear friend Annemiek in Holland, who is making videos about embodied language as well, but then in Dutch. And she has recently made some very, very beautiful videos. I mean, all her videos are equally beautiful, I must say. But this one is, for me, particularly standing out because she is, in these videos, expressing her way, in her own way, what it is like to not have any thoughts and to be without a mind and to be without inner language. Because, yeah, that is the reality of language, that there is no language inside of us. And so when we have this, what I call embodied language, then you realize that the language is just coming out of your mouth, but language is not inside of you and then it comes out. No, it just emerges, it just happens because it can happen and you let it happen. And so this creative aspect of language is only captured when we engage in embodied language. And then it is very clear that there is no thinking, there is no mind, there is just spaciousness. There is just this opportunity in our current state, in our current act, actually, to say what we are saying. And in the same way, and this is how she explains it, and I just want to briefly allude to that, briefly also let you know that I fully approve of that I fully acknowledge that what she's saying is correct. Because when you walk, you are not, let's say, for instance, when you're walking, you are not riding your bicycle. Yeah. And when you ride a bicycle, you are not walking. So these are different acts. And so it's very important to recognize that what act are you currently involved in? And so when you are involved in speaking, yeah, when you're truly involved in speaking, then that means that you are also listening to yourself. But since we are conditioned with a way of speaking which are called disembodied language, in which we are not listening to ourselves, in which we're trying to get others to listen to us, and in which we are trying to listen to others, we are not total, we are not, you could say, conscious in the act that we are doing, in the act of speaking itself. And therefore, we begin to have all these imaginary assumptions about inner language, a mind, thoughts. But there are no thoughts. There cannot be any thoughts. There cannot be any language inside of us. There's only overt language. Yeah, so language that is spoken, that is heard, language that is written, that is read. Yeah, and so once you recognize that there is no inner language, you find your embodied language continues effortlessly, beautifully, and you will say surprising things because now you are able to say them. Now you have actually freed yourself up to say them. and you can let your attention go to whatever is in your attention and describe what is in your attention. You just keep listening to the sound, and you feel how your language is liberating you, how your language undoes, your language basically dissolves your history of conditioning with disembodied language, and you feel so attuned with yourself. You feel so completely at ease with yourself. And obviously, when you do this by yourself, listening to yourself while you speaking with yourself, you realize that, of course, you can do this with others too. And this is when Annemiek and I have our weekly wonderful conversations with each other. So now I'm going to go into this reading, which is actually an elaboration or an extension, or I don't know, also a response to what Annemiek has said in her Dutch videos and in her writing also, because she also has a blog which is called Luisterend Spreken, and where you can read her text in Dutch. She speaks also on her YouTube videos in Dutch, and I am also of Dutch origin, so we also together speak in Dutch. And but this text is you could say a follow-up or a continuation of what she says about being in the act and being consciously involved. And when you're riding your bicycle, you're riding your bicycle. When you are walking, you are just consciously walking. When you're eating, you're consciously eating. So the issue of consciousness is actually something that has to do with our language, and that is what this writing is about. You are conscious when you listen to yourself while you speak. So, your sound is a feedback mechanism. You feel your sound, you experience your sound. And when you hear your sound when you talk, you are all of a sudden conscious of your speech. In your regular way of talking, you are not conscious because you are not listening to yourself. And therefore, you speak in an automatic way, in a mechanical way, in an unconscious way. So, your embodied language is because you know with absolute certainty that you have embodied language. When you have embodied language, when you begin to discover the difference between embodied language and disembodied language, you know for sure that this difference is there, and you know exactly when you engage in embodied language. So once you have had some embodied language, you are, of course, also conscious that sometimes you still have disembodied language, because your conditioning history with disembodied language, it continues to linger even after you have discovered that you can have embodied language. As a matter of fact, you only become conscious of your history of conditioning with disembodied language once you begin to engage in embodied language. And this all makes sense because you cannot be conscious about your disembodied language with disembodied language. That disembodied language has to stop. So unless disembodied language has been stopped, your embodied language can begin. These two are mutually exclusive. One has to stop for the other to begin. So each time you fall back again into your previous conditioning, your disembodied language is taken over and your embodied language has been stopped again. And it's very important to recognize how that switches and to catch yourself, to become conscious of this, this going back and forth between these two. Oh, I'm actually, it's funny, I'm used to reading from the screen, so I want to screen it, to roll it up on my screen, but it is on my laptop, so I need to roll it on my laptop. So you are conscious of your embodied language, but you are also conscious of your disembodied language in the same way that you are conscious, like Annemiek is saying on her video, of walking and eating. In other words, walking and eating are two kinds of behavior which can be done in a conscious way or in an unconscious way. And we all probably know what that means. It isn't nice to engage in disembodied language because you're not listening to yourself. You are disconnecting from yourself. So when you're not listening to yourself and disconnecting from yourself, you feel a discomfort. You inevitably feel stress, worry, fear, anxiety, chaos, distraction, all kinds of things, all kinds of negative things. Why? Because you are not listening to yourself. So engaging in disembodied language is uncomfortable, is unpleasant. Yeah. Likewise, it isn't nice to walk without knowing where you're going. Yeah. And I'm simply meaning here that, let's say, you're going somewhere, but you do not know where you're going. Let's say you get lost in a forest or something. Yeah. And you kind of, I don't know if you've ever been in that situation. It can be quite frightening when you suddenly realize, like, oh my God, we have walked around in a circle and we didn't get out of this place. We didn't get to where we wanted to go. We didn't achieve our goal. We didn't go to where we wanted to be. And of course there is something to say about adventure, of course, and there's all kinds of things to be said about, oh yeah, it's wonderful to be lost and all that kind of stuff. But wait a second, when you are on your path to some goal, you want to stay on that path and you want to go to that particular place. Yeah. And so if your walk is not bringing you where you want to be, then yeah, your walk was in vain. You have wasted your energy. And likewise, also stuffing yourself with food, yeah, unconsciously, you're just eating, getting obese. That's also not a good thing. It is bad for your health. It is not good to make. It doesn't make you happy. It only makes you feel stuffed. So also, you could say some people, they go walking or they go jogging or whatever, and then they become kind of addicted to this particular behavior. And so walking or eating or any kind of exercise can become some sort of an addiction, a sort of an escape from other things, yeah, which cannot get your attention as long as you keep involved in this particular activity. So do you see that these kind of behaviors which prevent you actually from other behaviors which are better for you, that these behaviors are not so good for you? Yeah. And there are, of course, many other things you can do, yeah, to sort of, yeah, basically not pay attention to the things you don't want to pay attention to, because, yeah, just imagine that you become conscious about who you really are and what you really do. Then you would have to acknowledge that you're not very satisfied with yourself, that you're not very happy with yourself, and that you're actually kind of gross. And that you kind of feel bad about yourself. Okay, well, when you start to talk like that, you hear your disembodied language, and of course you don't want to hear that. Yeah, there's a reason for that, because that's not the behavior that actually really fits with you. You have been doing this automatically because you were conditioned a certain way, and because you fell into this pattern, this addictive pattern, or this pattern of neglect, or this pattern of, what is it, pattern of escapism, where you are not really conscious of yourself anymore. Okay, so due to your disembodied language, although it is painful, stressful, frustrating, troubling, chaotic, sad, effortful, and dissatisfying, you constantly engage in many behaviors of which you are unconscious. That's what I was just explaining. Once you become capable of having ongoing embodied language, you will stop this entire behavioral repertoire which is associated with your disembodied language. This is a process of what they call selection by consequences, because you are conscious, because you talk with yourself about your behavior, you write to yourself about your behavior, about talking with yourself about your behavior. So you become aware of the consequences of your own behavior. And you realize, like, wait a second, these consequences are not good for me. These are not the consequences I want. Therefore, you want to stop those behaviors. Therefore, you want to stop the repertoire which is associated with, which emerges from, which is created by, which is maintained by your disembodied language. And that whole repertoire, all these behaviors, which you may have been used to for many, many years, these behaviors, they are falling by the wayside. It's possible. I am doing it, Annemiek is doing it, and it is so good to do that. Yeah. So this process is a process of selection by consequences about which you have become conscious because you talk with yourself and you write about your own behavior. As the previous paragraphs have very succinctly described, being conscious of your behavior isn't, as we are all inclined to believe, an inner process. No, you talk about it with yourself. You can hear it. You have written about it. You can read it. It isn't an inner process in which we imagine that there are words and sentences inside of us. No, it is a matter of using our language correctly, which means engaging in embodied language. Disembodied language is incorrect in the same way that being lost by walking around in circles is wrong or incorrect, and obsessive eating and stuffing yourself with food would be incorrect. Yeah? So eating, enjoying food, healthy food, feeling satiated, feeling energy because food gives you energy, yeah, that's good. Yeah? But feeling stuffed and feeling bloated or feeling like, oh man, you can't walk because you're so obese, that's not good. That's not good. High blood pressure and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Diabetes and all that. Being conscious is not a moral issue. This is a very important point. Being conscious is not a moral or a social issue, because if it is a moral issue, it is a social issue. Other people tell you to be conscious. It is something we tell ourselves. It is personal. It is individual. Being conscious of our behavior, we realize that there is an enormous difference between the by disembodied language conditioned group behaviors which don't belong to us. Yeah, we are conditioned to behaviors which make us belong to groups and which goes hand in hand with our disembodied language. There's a big difference between those behaviors and the natural, graceful, effortless behaviors which belong to us and always have good outcomes, positive consequences, desirable consequences, because they are based on our embodied language. Yeah? And so all these behaviors which are associated with our embodied language, that is a whole different repertoire than the repertoire of disembodied language. The behaviors of our embodied language, that is the repertoire of our language enlightenment. In disembodied language, we don't want to admit, we don't want to listen to ourselves while we speak, because we are always unconsciously, mechanically, automatically, we're always fighting with other so-called communicators. Even if we just do this in our so-called mind, imaginary speaking, by worrying or by supposedly thinking about them, yeah, we are always busy with others. And we're and in the reality, in our day-to-day communication, in our interactions with others, there is a constant struggle going on for attention with the other communicators, who are, of course, in reality, our adversaries, because they compete for the attention. And whoever gets the attention wins the battle for attention in disembodied language and gets to say what they supposedly want to say or what is supposedly important, whereas the other people, they just get to listen. They just get to do as they are told. So there is a hierarchy in disembodied language in which people with power, with authority, people with knowledge also, people who have certain skills, they get to speak more than others and they get to do all the talking, where other people have to do as they are told, and they can only talk when other people are lower than them, so to speak, when they are superior to other people. Yeah. And so this hierarchy is a social hierarchy which is maintained by the struggle for attention, and whoever can manipulate the audience, the listener, yeah, or the listeners in such a way that they attract the attention with their way of speaking, with their disembodied language, then they become famous, they become important, they become powerful, they become the authority. But embodied language is not based on authority over others. Embodied language is based on authority over ourselves because we listen to ourselves. In disembodied language, strangely enough, even though people have authority over others, they are not having any authority over themselves. They're not in touch with themselves in disembodied language. So in disembodied language, everybody is fighting unconsciously with everybody else because we see each other as adversaries. And we're all struggling to get each other's attention with our ordinary way of speaking. And we're trying to attract the attention with what we're saying. And we also, of course, have all these longings. We want them to accept us, to expect us, and to acknowledge us. And we also don't want to make it seem as if we're having trouble understanding somebody, what others are saying. Yeah, so we also always want to pretend at all costs that, oh no, we are listening, we are open, we are respectful. Yeah. But we don't want other people to notice that no, we're having no problems with accepting you. We hear what you're saying. I hear you, as we don't want them to know that we are not listening to them, that we're not obeying them, that we're not at all interested in them, that we're not respecting them, we're not loving them or adoring or praising them by paying attention to them, as that would indicate to those who have social authority over others that we are disobedient, we are unintelligent, we are lazy, we are antisocial, we are crazy, we are criminal, we are simply having too much fun. Yeah, all these things. Do you see how that is? Yeah, we are constantly in our usual way of talking, which is disembodied language. We are constantly forced to listen. And if we don't listen, then we are punished because we're not paying attention enough. We're distracted and we're having too much fun, or we are disobedient. You see what I'm saying? In real human interaction, authentic human interaction, genuine bidirectional human interaction in which we take turns as speakers and as listeners, we are not engaging in any struggle at all. There is no punishment. There is no fear of punishment. We are just talking. And the conversation can just emerge, can just evolve effortlessly, beautifully. Yeah. So embodied language is a whole different way of talking. And it reveals behaviors which belong to embodied language, which are entirely different behaviors than the pretentious behaviors, the arrogant behaviors, the manipulative behaviors that we involve, the aggressive behaviors, the violent behaviors that we involve ourselves in with disembodied language. So being conscious, whether it is about our language or about anything else, being conscious, we can only be conscious with language. Let's just put that first. As long as we do not have embodied language, we're not conscious. We are just pretending to be conscious. We're just claiming to be conscious. Other people are impressed by us because they believe that we are better than them. They believe that we know something that they don't know, and therefore they should be listening to us. They should act obediently. They should act slavishly, or submissively. Yeah. But in embodied language, there's no submissive behavior. There's nobody higher or lower. We are truly equal in the sense that we are all in touch with ourselves because we all listen to ourselves. Yeah. So being conscious, considered from a disembodied language point of view, being conscious and having embodied language is a subversive and revolutionary act, as everyone who behaves unconsciously, they immediately notice that you are not like them. In effect, they also become a little bit conscious because of you, because you do not behave the way they do. This is especially obvious when you no longer participate in the disembodied language which is going on everywhere, when you, in spite of their disembodied language, continue to express your language enlightenment with your embodied language and with all your other behaviors. Yeah? With all your other behaviors, you just do not even participate in this disembodied language. You just remove yourself from the conversation. You are just not part of this kind of interaction. You have no interest. Although people behave unconsciously due to their disembodied language, when they are near you, something changes in them, and they don't know and they cannot find out what it is, unless they themselves begin to also speak with themselves and listen to themselves and explore their own embodied language. Yeah, that's how this works. So in summary, this is the reading that I did. Now I want to still say a few things about being conscious. That hearing your sound, the sound is only there when you make it. Your language is only there when you produce it. Your walking is only there when you walk. Your riding your bicycle is only there when you ride your bicycle. There is no language when you do not speak. And so you can be conscious without language. But you have become conscious because you use your language correctly. Okay.